Welcome to the Tactical Cyber Podcast, where we transform strategic cyber insights into actionable tactics for everyday implementation. Join your hosts, retired FBI Supervisory Special Agent Darren Mott and Risk Advisory Practice Leader at Warren Averett, Paul Perry. Together, they bring decades of experience from the front lines of cybersecurity and risk management to help business owners and individuals take the actions that will keep their business and personal digital data safe. Each episode, we delve into the world of cybersecurity, sharing real-world experiences, expert interviews, and practical tips to safeguard your digital landscape. It's time to move past cyber strategies and start working cyber tactics.
Hello, friends. It is Happy New Year 2025. Welcome to this first episode of 2025 of the Tactical Cyber Podcast. I am your host, retired FBI Supervisor Special Agent Darren Mott. With me, as always, my co-partner in crime here, Paul Perry. Paul, welcome to 2025.
Darren, glad to be here. Glad to be back with the listeners, and I hope you're doing well in the new year.
You too. Anything fun happen over the holidays for you?
Lots of Legos. I see them in behind you, but my kids got those, and so we've been putting them together and taking them apart as much as we can.
My in-laws moved in with me, so that was my holiday. Jeez.
I guess you win, right?
Yeah, and I injured my elbow playing pickleball, so I haven't played pickleball in like 6 weeks. So, and I think I have a tear in one of my muscles. So it's all going magical for me. I gotta say,
the excuses have started now that we haven't gotten to play pickleball yet. I got you.
Yeah, right. There you go. That's the excuses. Yes, that's exactly what it is. All the excuses. So we were supposed to have a guest today, Evan Dumichel from a company called North Star Strategies, was going to come on and talk compliance, but he lives in California, and apparently there's a raging fire going on near his house. So he wasn't going to be able to, he had to cancel at the last minute, but that's for good reasons. I hope it diverts into a different direction than kind of where he's going here. So, but Paul and I will soldier on. I will continue to fight my Riverside issues. So I'm using a different camera than I've used in the past to try to get my audio to sync correctly. I'm sure I will still fight with bringing up screens and doing all that stuff, but whatever it is, some things never change. So we got that going for us, which is nice. So let's do what I didn't want to do this. This is the one last thing I ever want to do is let's predict the cybersecurity problems for 2025. Yet, as we redivert our idea of what we're going to do today, let's go ahead and look at that. And then, but take it from what does this mean tactically, right? We can talk, and a lot of these things are going to be the same predictions that were in 2024, 2023, 2022. The predictions sometimes don't really change, but we can certainly discuss them and try to find a tactical approach to what it means from that. So let me bring that up here.
And I think that, even though the predictions don't change, I would argue the severity of it probably changes, right? This is probably something we haphazardly talked about in the past, but maybe it's more in the forefront because of a policy, because of software that's being used that's not used in the past. So while the prediction probably doesn't change, I would argue some of the severity of it might.
Sure. And I'll say I'll give one prediction that probably the solution to a lot of these things is the same solution, the same, blocking and tackling we should always be doing. But let's take a look. Predictions 2020. This is from Cyber Magazine, so I've never read it in my life, but it's got cyber in the name, although they spell cyber wrong. But let's hope that maybe it's something good. So, okay, first number 10, cyber security mesh architecture. Well, I will say that's a new. I have not heard necessarily something I talk about very often, so maybe this will be the buzzword for 2025, but represents a transformative approach to enterprise security, moving beyond traditional siloed defense mechanisms. Well, they use C, so this must be a UK magazine. What do you know? Do you know anything about this? Before we even get into it, do you even know what this is talking about?
I don't, but I have to assume it's trying to go to a more holistic, if you want to talk tactical, it's trying to go to a more holistic approach. And yes, we have this system and this system and this system, and they're all doing separate things, but is the architecture of the organization or the architecture of the software now that it's all in one place. And you can't just look at something very decentralized. You have to kind of look at it holistically. And yes, we don't have any issues over here, but when you add this issue or this potential issue and this potential issue, we have a bigger issue. That would be my assumption based on understanding of mesh architecture from a cyber perspective or a technology perspective.
Yeah.
If that makes
Well, it
sense.
does say is that it achieves this through 4 critical layers: security, analytics, intelligence, distributed identity fabric. That's a new term for me. I'll have to do some research on what that is. Consolidated policy management. Now, my question would be, have you not been consolidating your policies up to this point? Do you just have them all willy-nilly everywhere? We're just going to have policies. That's, so you probably should have been doing that anyway. Integrated dashboards. So, yes, let the executives see what it is you're doing so they can feel happy about it.
Well, and so you've got your information security group over here doing one thing. You've got your help desks over here doing something else. They're probably seeing something very similar, and I would assume in their decentralized view, it doesn't look like an issue, but oh my gosh, it's really coming from multiple ways, and so we've really got to have a more coordinated effort, would be my assumption of that for the coming year.
Sure. Yeah. All right. So, good. Number 9. Oh, the word regulatory. I see that. I just get excited because how awesome can this be? Regulatory changes around ransomware. Well, okay. Well, let's see what this has to say. The EU emerged as a frontrunner in cybersecurity regulation. So this is all European-based predictions. So, but we can translate it here because usually it'll start there, and people think that's a great idea.
Right.
We should do this.
In
So
3 to 5 years, it's in America.
yeah.
Right?
Well, it does say simultaneously the U.S. took a more aggressive stance with the Treasury Department sanctioning cryptocurrency exchanges facilitating ransom payments. So again, I've said this many times. I'm sure you've heard me say it. You can sanction everybody you want. They will just go out of business and reform as something else that's no longer sanctioned but does the same thing.
Right. I mean, you've got to get to the heart of true changes from a regulatory perspective, right? If it's fines for not having good controls in place, and we can argue what good controls in place is, but at some point we've got to get to how do we impact organizations that do not take cyber seriously?
Well, I think you have to entice them to want to do it seriously.
Right.
So give them incentives, don't give them punishment.
Tax incentives?
Right. Yeah. Let's say that, right, here's 10 things we would like you to do. If you do a voluntary audit and we see that you're doing all 10, at least to this particular standard, then you can get this kind of tax break or this kind of tax incentive or something along that line. Why wouldn't people want to do it at that point?
Much like a R&D tax credit, right? If I'm doing research and development, I get a tax credit based on the effort that I put in place to build or create or change. And now we're just applying that to the function of cybersecurity, which sometimes is a point in time, right? It worked today, tomorrow it doesn't because of a new vulnerability, but that's part of monitoring. That's part of that mesh architecture, right? Making sure that everybody's doing the same thing and we're all working together for the same cause.
But it does seem we still seem to come down on the biggest issue. That it seems like for all these that they think the biggest issue is the payment of the ransom. Sure, that's a problem. You can argue you're incentivizing the bad guys to do bad things, but if you incentivize the victims to do the right things first, the bad guys can't do the bad things.
That is true. I think also some of it's trying to follow the money and trying to figure out who's playing on both sides of the fence as it relates to cybersecurity.
Yeah, fair enough. All right, number 8, generative AI and cybersecurity. This is really not a prediction. This has been a prediction since 2024, because when did ChatGPT really hit? End of 2023, somewhere in there?
Right.
Or 22? Yeah, so it's been going on for a while. So this is not a big surprise that AI is going to be something in cybersecurity, both from a blue team, a purple team, and a red team perspective. But, okay. So let me ask this question. I got a question for you. So for the companies you're dealing with, we could talk about, the bad guys are using generative AI to improve their social engineering emails and stuff like that. The good guys are trying to use it to develop ways to detect those things. But how are companies that you're dealing with incorporating AI into their structure in general? Are they using it for how their business runs?
Yeah, I think the majority of it's used for communication, right? And so a lot of organizations are using generative AI to get everybody speaking from the same hymn book, as we sometimes say. But they're also trying to be innovative. What are we not thinking about as it relates to our product, our service, our client, our industry? And so there is some innovation happening with it. But with that, we always talk about brings the threat that we are using the generative AI incorrectly. We're putting information on a web facing that, maybe that's proprietary information. Maybe we shouldn't put it out there. And how is that going to be potentially used against us as an organization? So I think a lot of the conversations we are having with companies around generative AI and its impact on cybersecurity is just making sure that they're training correctly, everybody's using it correctly, safeguards are up. That's the biggest piece. I think that when organizations say, you know what, we're going to use generative AI to transform the way we do business, sometimes the safeguards that they're putting up around, or lack thereof, around their data is the bigger issue, right? We can't just willy-nilly let everybody use a feature like Copilot or ChatGPT without making sure everything we have in our organization has been properly identified as maybe this is sensitive information and it really cannot be used with generative AI. So I think that's the biggest thing that companies need to think about this year is as they implement more of that Gen AI technology, what safeguards do I have in place to protect my information, and what training are we doing with our people to make sure that they're using it correctly? And again, if you want to get to not central, more everybody working on the same page, more centralized review is the monitoring of who's doing what with generative AI. I think that's those are the pieces that organizations really need to be thinking about from a tactical perspective in using Gen AI.
Fair enough. All right, this number 7. Is this the 10th year I've seen quantum computing as a prediction for the next year? I mean, this has been around a long time. And let's say quantum computing finally becomes mainstream and it becomes available. Who's affording it? Governments will afford it and use it, but that's it. What do we have to worry? What
gets it first? That's what I've always said, right? Whoever gets quantum computing done correctly first and uses it broadly wins the game, right? We all have to now compete with them. But I think quantum computing, yes, you're right. It's been around for a very long time, but it evolves and changes. And until it exists, and I think that's probably why, if I had to think about why does that show up on every prediction every year, it's because is this the year country X finally gets quantum computing and wins the game?
Yeah, and that's going to be where it comes first. And I think they always put these two things together, quantum computing and cryptography, because the cryptography is going to become pretty much useless once. That's the idea, right? That's everything I've heard. I haven't seen it in action. I have no idea, but that's the idea. Is these computers will be so fast that encryption will no longer be useful because it can be cracked so quickly, which is going to change a whole. It's going to change a whole lot of ways that we do passwords, we do authentication, do all that kind of stuff. So ideally, and I'm going to say this is probably not the case, but companies and entities that deal in authentication mechanisms and that industry, hopefully they're planning for whatever they're going to do next, because if quantum computing suddenly becomes somewhat mainstream and that there's enough organizations using it that cryptography becomes useless, if you're not ready to go with what your next method of authentication is, it's going to be not good.
And that's why you're seeing all these articles talk about the world without passwords, right? Because it becomes everything else that you are and what and know. That becomes how I need to. I mean, what was it, 2 or 3 weeks ago during the holidays? There was all that chatter coming out about don't use text message based authentication, right? Because of all of the telecom things that were happening. So, I mean, I think that's just the evolution, and it's getting to this piece of, yes, this works when it works correctly. It works now. But how do you do that tomorrow when password no longer matters? And I think that's why there's all this discussion about, we used to say change it every 90 days. Well, now it's don't change it. That's one methodology, is because when there is a change that potentially is an issue that you need to investigate. So I think you're seeing a gradual change from change it every 90 days to I don't even have a password. And that's just going to blow people's minds.
Right. And actually, you said something I want to redirect a little bit off of this for a second. Is you mentioned the telecommunication compromise with Salt Typhoon and the Chinese getting into AT&T and all the other communication companies. One thing to note on that I want to note for the dozens of people listening, is that this is not just telecommunications as the issue. It is all critical national industries. It is, if you're in energy, if you're in banking, if you're in healthcare, pick the 16, chemical, stuff like that. The emergency services, municipalities. Any critical infrastructure. The Chinese are targeting all of those things. So if you can look at it and say, hey, I'm not in telecommunication, I don't have to worry about this. No, that's the wrong approach to take. Take a look at who you serve, what industry you're in. Chances are pretty good you are being targeted right now. I saw another article that the top 3 or the top 5 industries targeted in 2024 were manufacturing, finance, gas and oil, healthcare, and schools. All right, those are probably going to be relatively the same for this year. Maybe somebody else will pop in and somebody else will pop down, but those are just the top 5. That doesn't mean that the rest aren't being targeted. Those are the ones that get hit the most. Which, if you're in one of those industries, what do you take from that?
You take from that you can't slack one day, right? And you can't.
Right.
You always have to have a plan for what's next. I mean, I've always said, when you talk about those 5 industries, whenever I do presentations and we talk about education and we talk about kind of why there are issues, but what's the next big thing, it's everybody's choosing convenience. That's why we use technology. I've said that many times, even on here and other places. But it's going to be it's going to be a big financial institution that loses 25 to 30% of everybody's money. And is that the thing that wakes everybody up to say, oh, wait, I really need to care about this. I really don't need to be convenient with my technology. And I really need to, that's always been my prediction. So I hope I'm wrong. But that's always been what's the catalyst that wakes everybody up to say, oh, we need to do better.
Yeah, I fear it's going to be, it happens to them.
Right.
I mean, even if you're in the same industry and it happens to 5 of your competitors, the thought's going to be, well, it's not going to happen to me. The right. Fear is, and don't think, that's my prediction. It's going to happen to you. Don't think it's going to happen to you. You can probably make that prediction every year. So that's probably a safe way to go. All right. Back to this. Increased focus on Internet of Things security. Again, this is not a new prediction. I've seen this many times. This is the year of IoT. But I don't disagree with it. I mean, there's certainly more of them. It's more of it. But there should have already been an increased focus on Internet of Things devices.
I would agree with that, but you're right. The more things and people become smart, and you know what I'm talking about, the more that's connected, the more that one little thing going down will disrupt everything, right? It's like,
good point, yeah.
if somebody takes out my local down the street electricity, that's one thing. But if somebody hits a power plant and takes down all the electricity, that's a whole other thing. And you find that one piece that's vulnerable, and you can cripple everybody with one little piece. So yes, IoT is always on the list, but I think, again, now more than ever, there's more of it out there. There's more cars. All of that is going to increase the issues.
I think the one big change now from what I would have said a couple years ago is, you'd have companies that, hey, can we put this Alexa speaker on the network? But now there's so many devices that are considered IoT that a lot of it is all part of standard business process. So you can no longer look at IoT as it's just one of the couple of things we have on that someone wanted to come on for, like you said, for convenience. There are things that are IoT that we have to have in order to do the business. So that's what you have to take a look at those things and say, okay, what processes on this do we have to have on? Do I need to send back? Because all of these IoT devices in the service agreement, there's a button that says, do you want to share the analytics of this device with the manufacturer? It's always there. If it's on your TV, it's on your Alexa device, always there. Always say no. But sometimes they're turned on by default, and you have to actually go in and physically turn it off.
What was that? The LinkedIn. No offense to LinkedIn if we're on there, but I mean, they opted everybody into your information will be used to train our AI, right? That was an opt-in, not an option, not an option to opt in, right? And so that's the other thing is Internet of Things usually is an immediate opt-in. It can be helpful in cases, but for the most part, you got to make sure, from a tactical perspective, right? With tactical cyber is the discussion. If I'm a healthcare organization, if I have a bunch of IoT devices, they cannot be on the same server or even behind the same firewall as my patient information. That has to be separated, right? And I think that's where smaller organizations get into an issue where it's like, well, I don't have the resources or the funds or the people to separate it. Well, you got to stop thinking like that, and you've got to say, I cannot put my guest Wi-Fi on the same server as, my patient information. I cannot put these IoT devices on the same server as my patient information, because if it's vulnerable, you're getting back to the crown jewels of what people want. So you've really got to tactically figure out what am I protecting, and making sure it's all protected correctly.
And I'll say from a home perspective, same thing. You should have a separate network for your IoT devices. So whatever your computer's on should be on a separate. Now I say that, I don't necessarily do it myself. Like I suffer from, hey, I'm smart enough that this won't happen. It's just, me and my wife, whatever. But I purchased a router specifically for this, to set up a separate isolated router that all of these things, other than my main computer, the one I'm on now, and the other ones I have that I do for work and stuff, are separated out of that. I'm half tempted to, come February 1st, when some things change around here, actually bring in a second line just to separate out business stuff and home stuff. My wife will love that. Hey, another internet connection. That's what we need.
But that's what we have to be thinking about, and that's what the normal. I would say normal society doesn't think that far and says, "Oh, it's just all on there," and I've got the password and I've given it to everybody that's coming to my house, and I never deleted it from people's phones, so they all have my password, right? So, I mean, that's the thing that society needs to start contemplating and thinking about, and then actually doing.
Right. And I'm going to divert again, because you mentioned LinkedIn and their opt-in for the AI stuff. I've seen this many times on Facebook, and if you're listening to this, you need to tell all your friends and family members that posting a thing on your Facebook feed that says, "The time has come. I am now telling Facebook you cannot use my pictures without my permission." That stupid thing that everybody's posting and saying, copy and post this in your own feed, is not real. Facebook you saying it doesn't create a legal binding document with you and Facebook. So my God, people, stop doing that.
You've got to get into the settings. Find somebody under the age of 25 to help you with those settings.
Yeah, you're right. I'm not even, but I've seen so many people say, by saying this, I must be. I had one guy, I told him this is an urban legend that doesn't mean anything. He goes, "Better safe than sorry." Okay. Thanks for playing. All right. Sorry. All right. Vulnerabilities in 5G networks. Why is this a 2025 prediction? 5G's been out for 6 years now, however long it's been out. I mean, the vulnerabilities are there. They have been there the whole time. But I guess
it's,
I'm not going to talk.
Knowledge is protection.
Knowledge is protection. Yeah, well, I'm not going to spend any time on that. One's so stupid. I'm not even going to spend any time on it. State-sponsored cyber warfare. Woo! They went out on a limb on that prediction. Way to go. I bet you they did a lot of research to say, okay, let's research this and see what's happening. So maybe the difference is they're calling it warfare now. So maybe that's the difference.
That term. Now we can. But insurance policies are going to love that term, right?
Yeah.
Because then it takes them, because now you're in an active war, and now there's exclusions related to the active war. And what point does cyber warfare from a nation state? Some policies are already saying that's not what we're going to cover. And what is the likelihood you're going to get hit by that versus a phishing attack that changes banking account information and you wire $1 million? Well, if it's coming from an organization that's inside of a nation state that's being supported by the nation state, is it nation state or is it not? Right. The burden of proof is now on me. I've got to prove, and that's going to be very difficult.
And let me ask this question: Have insurance companies defined what they define cyber warfare, a nation state act, is in these policies, or are they just using it as a nebulous term?
I think I'm not going to speak for every insurance policy. Some that I've seen, it's more of a nebulous term, right? It's an active war, and the ones that I have read more into and about, it is the burden of proof is now I've got to prove that it was not a true nation state that caused this breach or attack or theft of dollars. That becomes very onerous becomes very hard for corporations and normal society to do.
Well, that's an interesting selling point then for consulting companies, because that is the argument that you can have cyber insurance, right? But this clause in there that deals exactly with this problem of cyber warfare or a nation state act, there's no way you as an individual will ever be able to attribute it to something other than that, right? Unless the bad guy sends you an email with a picture of your data and says, we are not state affiliated. We promise, swear to God, we're not state affiliated. You're good to go. Claim your insurance. Which I'll be honest with you, the bad guys, the criminal guys would do that because they want the insurance companies to pay. So there is that.
They want the money.
Yeah.
But it also proves how many organizations that are not nation states are supported by the nation states. Because I would argue an organization inside of a nation state that the nation state does nothing to them, they are supported by the nation state. And I would call that a nation state attack.
Absolutely right. Which is why you need the tactical.
I don't know what you call it.
Yeah. Exactly. So yeah, nation state support, and so like if it's in China, they're paying to the Chinese. Russia's paying to the Russian government. So the point here is get in front of it, protect yourself, so you don't have to be in that state where you have to prove it was a nation state thing. So protect your stuff, do the blocking and tackling, find someone who can help direct you in the motion to do that. At least start down that road of we're not doing anything cyber-wise, that we're doing something now cyber-wise. I mean, look at the 2024 victims across the board. United Healthcare, Microsoft twice. These are companies. I just use those two. They're the ones that come directly to mind. AT&T. Right. Those are companies with money to protect their stuff, and they're not doing it. They're not able to do it correctly. So if you're, not that size, you've got a lot more holes that you really need to deal with.
And I'm not an insurance agent, so I'm not going to claim to know all of this, but I have seen some discussions where there is an argument between if you have different organizations doing your insurance for cyber versus crime or versus normal corporation, there is a conversation about, well, when somebody sends an email and the email, I use it to change information, I then make a payment, that is a crime, right? But it's also a cyber attack. So which one does it fall up under? And if you have two different insurance policies or two different insurance companies, that may be a little bit harder for you to figure out which one it goes under, because they may start to argue. And so it kind of puts to, I should have all of it with one, but you don't have all your eggs in one basket. But you've really got to think about and delineate what is considered under my crime policy and what is considered under my cyber policy.
Very good. Good points. Good points. Advanced ransomware techniques. Yeah, I don't disagree that that's certainly a good prediction, because AI is going to make it much easier for the social engineered oriented ransomware attacks to work. It's going to make it easier for bad guys to find vulnerabilities within software when the AI can read the code and say, this doesn't look right, so maybe there's a vulnerability here. So, the ability to attack in different ways is certainly going to be a problem.
I wonder if this is considering deep fakes, if that's another piece of it, right? But I continue to look at videos and some of the platforms that show deep fake videos and audios, and I can still see imperfections in some of the way people don't blink as much as some of those deep fakes are allowing people to blink and having a conversation. Some people's heads don't move that much, and you've got to understand who you're dealing with to determine, that doesn't look like Paul talking to me, so I've really got to question it. And even if it is, figure out another way, another multi-factor authentication, another way to verify that something is legit. And I don't know if that's what this is talking about, but I would think that deep fakes are definitely going to be a piece going forward.
And that's a good point. I'm gonna switch to a different screen here in a second. I want to show you. You're talking deep fakes. I want to show you something that is funny. I think it's funny anyway. So,
did you do a video of us doing a podcast?
No, it's not. It's not a video. But you say that. But if you go to have you tried Google's Notebook LLM yet?
I have not.
So I have a website, and all I did was link the website to this particular version of AI, and you can hit create podcast, and it's two people talking about what it is you fed them. So all I did was feed them the URL. They did an 11-minute podcast on my website.
Wow. And
it sounds like two people having legitimate conversations. But my point here being, you're talking about deepfakes and all that kind of stuff. So I'm going to show you something I'm going to show you something here and see what you can figure out. Okay. So, all right. So can you see that?
Yep.
All right. So that is my page on LinkedIn, right? All right. Mm-hmm. I needed a headshot for for something, and I didn't want to go find a photographer. So I took 15 pictures of myself and sent it to this company called headshotpro.ai, and it sent me back 40 different. This is an AI generated image right here. Now you can't, wow. and yeah, my daughter saw it and she said, that was a really good picture until I looked at your hands. Now this is cropped, but this hand right here has like 6 fingers. If you were to see the full video, it's got like 6 fingers. So I'm sorry. Yeah. So anyway, so that was, but I have a bunch of them and the face is right. The face. And she said, can I have a tattoo on both arms? She said, I don't see your tattoo on the sleeve either. So that's another giveaway. But anyway, it looks right.
You know who you're dealing with. Right. And if it's somebody you've never dealt with, obviously you've got to determine, is this person real and is their request real? But if it's somebody you've known forever, look at the details, because you can figure that out pretty quickly.
Yeah. And I'm not in that good a shape. I'm in okay shape, but I'm not in that good a shape. But anyway, so there you go. Zero trust architecture. That's not new. I mean, I'm not sure what the prediction here. I guess I could read what the prediction is. Says
paradigm shift. Dr. Zero is sitting over there going, "This is what I've been screaming for 5-6 years." Right?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So I don't know why that's a prediction, because we're not even going to have to spend time on it. If you want to hear about zero trust, go back to the first episode of this podcast. You can hear Absolutely. Zero trust all day long if you want. AI powered cyber attacks. Not a surprise.
I think that's your big fix, right? That is being more sophisticated, that is coming after different aspects, right. That is using the technology. All technology, when created, there is somebody that sits there and goes, how can I use this nefariously, right? And AI is different. Unfortunately, its opportunities are more grand, I believe, right? Because it can do a lot more things. And so you've really got to look at it. You've got to understand it. And you've got to make sure you are comfortable with what you are using from an AI perspective.
Right. And like chapter 2 of my book is be skeptical of everything. So at this point, you have to be skeptical of audio, of video, of, pictures, like you're saying, of all the email you get. I had a friend of mine call me. He's got a company that he deals with in Texas, just got hit with a business email compromise scam. $400,000. Took them 10 days to realize they had a problem, and it was too late to get the money back. I'm not saying they used AI at all, but it's going to make those type of attacks easier to do and more frequent. So you've got to come up with policies, methodology. Yeah,
sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but we've always said in business email compromise, poor language was always the indicator of this is probably a phishing email. Well, with AI, they can make it sound correct. And so now I often say imperfections are the thing that tell me something is authentic. Although somebody would argue, well, they can go in there and say, have some misspellings or do something incorrectly. Well, 1 or 2, but you would see that all through. So you've really got to start changing your mindset, right? And that's probably what they're talking about, zero trust being a paradigm shift in the way we think about things. Is we can't trust everything. We have to verify it, but we have to find ways to verify it where we truly believe what we're doing and seeing.
Yeah. Yep. So,
nothing shocking there except for the mesh architecture. That's a new one, obviously,
right.
But it's still the same things. And I have said this time and time again in my lifetime, this problem doesn't go away. We still have this issue, and we still have to solve it.
Yeah. And we have to get people to be convinced that it needs to be solved, and they need to be part of the solution, right? You have to want to protect your own information, whether you're a business owner, whether you're at home, because we didn't even we're talking business. These are all business threats, right? These are not necessarily a lot of threats you have to worry about at home. We need to do an episode at some point where it's just the home stuff. It's just the sexting for the kids and all that kind of stuff. So if you're listening to this or watching this and you have someone who's an expert in this area, let us know. We can get them on. The next episode in 2 weeks, we're going to talk about the job, the cybersecurity personnel gap. Got a guy who's going to talk how he's dealing with that and how to do and what it looks like and why it's hard for people to find employees. And a lot of it has to do with, I'm giving a little bit of this away, but employers want unicorns for their cybersecurity roles. That's the problem. And you can. The problem is they don't realize you can make the unicorn,
right?
If you give someone a chance,
and if you have the technology and the resources to give to somebody who can turn into a unicorn, that's what you want to do. And so the workforce. I would argue all industries from a workforce perspective are having an issue that they're trying to solve. Cybersecurity, unfortunately, is one of the issues one of the industries that when you do have a workforce issue, it impacts absolutely everybody, because if I can't protect anything, I can't do business, right? And so that's why it's probably, I would argue, amplified more than other workforce issues.
All right. So what you got coming up in the next couple of weeks? Where can people find you speaking?
Weeks, I think we've got this podcast. We've got, sorry, my phone's going off. We've got a presentation coming up next week, talking more about cybersecurity to a group of entrepreneurs. I'm going to be up in Huntsville in beginning of February at a healthcare management conference, talking about creating a culture of cyber awareness within your organization. So more presentations. The presentations don't stop, and at the end of the day, it's my little way of, if one person goes back and changes one thing they did and stops one attack, I'm fighting for the greater good, and I'm doing my part. And if we can get everybody to think the same way, I think that's what's coming. What about you?
Good stuff.
What you got coming?
I got the thing I'm doing with you on February 7th, the fireside chat. I got some other stuff coming in February, but I'll talk more about that at the next podcast when it gets more aligned. Gotcha. And I'll listen to anybody. I'm going to bring back the Cyber Guy podcast. So I haven't really done much with that for about a year, because the Cyber Smart Morning News has taken up most of my time. And then we started this one, but I'm going to go back to the Cyber Guy podcast, try to find some FBI friends and some other folks talking cyber cases and things like that. More just, hey, real life, here's what we're dealing with. Like, here's how we're doing it. Here's how we got to that point. So, we'll see. I know a lot of, Still trying to figure out what to do with my life. Yeah.
I have a question for you kind of related to that, and not to get down a rabbit hole, but people who are listening and watching the news of what's happening, when you have leadership changes in federal law enforcement, and I don't want to take away from anybody that would speak on your Cyber Guy podcast, but what is it, does anything change from I'm using federal law enforcement to help protect my organization or to respond when something happens? When we see those leadership changes, is that something to be concerned about? Is it something to not be concerned about? Just kind of your quick thoughts, if you don't mind.
Right. So let's talk. I can speak to the FBI, and I can speak to most federal agencies from a leadership perspective, right? So when new administrations come in, the leadership changes. So the Attorney General is going to change. The FBI director looks like he's going to change. Now, the FBI director is a little different. It's a 10-year term, and theoretically, he doesn't have to change him out, but he's going to, if all indications are correct, which I'm good with that. CIA director will change. The DHS director will change. Those are all political appointee, largely strategic leadership roles. So from an end user, from a person who deals with the FBI on a regular basis, one thing I always say in presentations is know who your local FBI guy is. He's not going to change. The local FBI office leadership is not going to change a lot. Now, in every FBI field office, there's a special agent in charge. They come and go. But again, they're more that strategic leader for the office as a whole. The individuals you would deal with on an individual case-by-case basis, like if you had a ransomware attack or you had an intrusion into your network, the FBI cyber squad that you would deal with would be guys that have been there for a long time that you probably you should know. If you don't know them now, go learn who they are right now. You can contact them and they'll come do presentations and talk to your company for free at no problem. So the leadership piece will change some of the strategic priorities of the organization as a whole, but from a ground level field office perspective, the change is pretty limited as far as what most people will see from how they deal with the FBI on a normal basis, if they deal with them at all.
And I think that's good information. Thanks for sharing. But I think that's important for people as they continue down their path of putting in the right things and having the right responses ready, that things like that shouldn't change what they're doing. And so we'll continue to say, use federal law enforcement. They've got a lot more resources, especially internationally, which is where most of the attacks are coming from. So definitely something to continue to think about. And
I'll make a point. I made this point on LinkedIn a couple weeks ago that the FBI over the last year, I'm not going to say in the last 3 years, I'm proud of a lot of stuff that the FBI has done from a what you see in the newspaper perspective, right? All this cases should never be run out of headquarters. So there are people there in place that got fired, rightfully so, ended up getting money back or are on, news networks, and they're all idiots, whatever. They were all leadership idiots people. 99.8% of the workforce of the FBI wants to do the right thing the right way for the right reasons to stop bad guys from hurting good people, right? That's the goal. That's everybody's mission. It's a few bad people that are making it bad for everybody else. But that's the same for every organization, I think. Regardless of whether they're federal government, private sector, whatever, you're going to have percentages that can make your company look bad. Whereas everybody else who just works there just trying to do a good job, right? I go to Circle K in the morning for Diet Coke. I'm going to guess that not all of Circle K's leadership is great. There's probably some that have a problem, but it doesn't impact me from getting my Diet Coke. The people at my store are great. I love them. They know me. They're friendly. Great. That's awesome. So same thing. Yeah.
Good point.
Cool.
Enjoyed this discussion. Paul, enjoyed the conversation.
Yes. As always. So do I. I apologize over December, not really getting around to it, but holidays and stuff like that. Understood. But if you watch this or listen to it and you have a unique perspective on cybersecurity or how to deal with cyber from a tactical perspective, reach out to Paul or me, and we'll get you on the podcast and have a discussion with you. We just want to have discussions with people so we can keep companies and people and individuals safe from the cyber attacks that face us, because knowledge is protection. If you can understand the threats targeting you, you can assess your risk, proceed wisely. Paul, thanks again. We will talk again soon.
Thank you for listening to the Tactical Cyber Podcast. Please note that the views and opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the hosts and guests and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of their respective employers. If you have thoughts, comments, or suggestions on the Tactical Cyber Podcast, email Darren at thecyberguy.com. You can also follow Darren and Paul on LinkedIn at linkedin.com/in/Darren Mott or linkedin.com/in/Paul M. Perry CPA. Paul Perry is a member of Warren Averett CPAs and Advisors, where he leads the firm's risk advisory and assurance services team, a group dedicated to optimizing businesses' financial, operational, and technology controls so that organizations can make strategic choices for sustained growth. Learn more at warrenaverett.com. Stay safe, stay secure, and we'll see you next time.